What's up, everybody? Jimmy Smith with my preview of ESPN, UFC on ESPN, Poirier versus Hooker. Great main event. Not a lot of fights of substance beyond that. I don't see any contenders arriving from this. We could have some interesting fights. You never know until it's over. But I don't see any potential contenders coming out of this card. So hopefully we get some excitement. We start off at the bottom, and it's Sean Woodson versus Julian Erosa. What's funny is both these guys super tall for this division. I know it's a catchweight, but usually 145ers super duper tall. Julian Rosa 6'1", Sean Woodson 6'2.5". It's amazing how big these guys are for this weight class. When I saw Sean Woodson fight his last fight in the UFC against Kyle Bochniak, I couldn't believe they were the same weight class. But they have kind of similar styles where they're tall, they're rangy, they're unorthodox, they switch stances a lot. They attack from really funky angles. But Sean Woodson just seems better at that style than Julian Erosa. So that's the hard part to me is that, yeah, they're both tall. They both use their range well. But Julian Erosa has lost his last 3 in the UFC. Sean Woodson undefeated, coming off the win, as I said, over Kyle Bochniak. So it's like Erosa just hasn't quite figured out how to make his style work at the elite level. Got in on Dana White's Contender Series, but hasn't won in the UFC. Finished in 2 of them. He hasn't really gotten the use out of his frame that Sean Woodson has. Sean Woodson, against the more experienced Bochniak, I thought fought a great fight. Always kept Bochniak on the defensive, wondering about the jab, where's the attacks coming from next. He has this weird tendency to attack on the same side, meaning he'll kick with the right and then hook with the right over the top, stuff like that. I think Sean Woodson wins this fight. I think he's better on the feet. I think it's going to be mostly on the feet. He's had more success in the UFC. He has more confidence. I got to go with Sean Woodson in the opening fight, probably by decision. John Volante versus Maurice Greene. John Volante is one of those guys, and I called it a couple of his fights in the UFC. He's just frustrating to watch. Meaning he's big, he has kickboxing skills, he has real power when he really pulls the trigger, but he tends to hesitate a lot. He tends to plod forward, tends to try to chop guys down, but not that explosive, not aggressive when he needs to be. As I said, he's frustrating to watch for me. So he's never found his rhythm in the UFC at the elite level. Hasn't won 2 in a row since 2014, 2015. So it's been 1 step forward, 2 steps back for most of his career. I remember when he took on Shogun Rua, a lot of people thought, all right, that would be his coming out party. Fighting an older guy who was former champion, big name. People thought he'd come out on top, and he did not. He lost by TKO in the 3rd round. Since that, lost to Sam Alvey, Patrick Cummings. I called the Sam Alvey fight, and it was that inability to pull the trigger against Sam Alvey, who's not a volume guy, who isn't big for the weight class, none of those things. And that's been his issue throughout his career, is his unwillingness or inability to pull the trigger right when he needs to. Maurice Greene has a similar problem, but Maurice Greene is just a lot bigger. This is a 6'7" heavyweight. He's lost his last 2. I don't think he's an elite heavyweight, but I think he's just a little bit more aggressive than Volante, and I think Volante has trouble, which he always has, getting inside, and I think that really bugs him. This guy is 6'7". So that tendency to kind of plod on the outside and take his time and wait, I think really bites him in the ass against Maurice Greene. I don't think either one of these guys are elite at their respective weight classes. Certainly not at heavyweight. John Volante moving up. I don't see John Volante doing anything at heavyweight. So Maurice Greene is just going to be a little bit better. I don't know if he finishes Volante simply because Volante does have a decent chin, and Volante doesn't like coming in and putting himself in harm's way. But moving up to heavyweight, I think Maurice Greene wins this fight. Might finish him. If he does, it might be a little late. So Maurice Greene definitely in fight number 2. Kyle Daucus versus Brendan Allen. Kyle Daucus, 6'3", tall for the weight class. We saw him in the Contender Series. Didn't get a contract then. Spent 2 more fights in the minors before coming up to the UFC. Unorthodox, rangy. He certainly has skills. Good kickboxer. Southpaw. I think Brendan Allen's a little too aggressive for him. And I think that's it. I mean, Brendan Allen's nickname is All In. That's how the dude fights. 3 fights in the UFC. All of them wins. All of them finishes. Aggressive on the ground. Likes the takedown. Likes to go for it early. We saw him cut up, I think, in the Kevin Holland fight. That really didn't bug him. It didn't temper his aggression. Still kept going for it. Still kept pushing the pace. I think it's a bad guy to fight. A, in your UFC debut. B, in a small octagon. and see when we haven't seen from Kyle Daucus that kind of step forward one-shot power that can back off a guy like Brendan Allen. He has no knockouts in his career, 9 fights. When he tends to win, it's by submission. Well, Brendan Allen likes the ground game as well. Unless Brendan Allen makes a big mistake on the ground and lets Kyle Daucus in it with a submission, I think might boil down to who's more aggressive and who has the better striking. And I put Brendan Allen number 1 in both of those categories in this fight. So also that confidence of having been in the UFC before. He's 3-0. He's had success at the UFC level. Kyle Daucus has not. Closest he's gotten is a win in the Contender Series. I got to go with Brendan Allen in the third fight. I think he gets it done against Kyle Daucus. So moving on up, Mike Perry versus Mickey Gall. Look, so much has been made of Mike Perry having his girlfriend in his corner. I think it's stupid, obviously, having somebody who doesn't have the background necessary to be a real corner person in your corner. But with Mike Perry, if there's somebody it wouldn't really hurt, it'd be Mike Perry. He has a step forward and punch kind of style. He's 2-5 in his last 7 fights. He goes in, tries to knock you out. Either it works or it doesn't. He doesn't make a lot of mid-fight adjustments. He's not used to listening to people. So this is a guy who only really does one thing anyway. So I don't think any big coaching changes or tactical advice would really mean anything to him anyway. So if there's somebody who wouldn't be affected by having his girlfriend in the corner, it would be Mike Perry. But it just speaks to me of his mentality coming into fights. It's I'm going to go and do what I know how to do. If that's not good enough, oh well, I guess I lose. And that's been his entire career, especially in the UFC. Mickey Gall, not a great welterweight by any stretch of the imagination, but tends to win by submission, tends to win by rear naked choke. He wears guys down. He's positional. He's big for the weight class. So against an aggressive guy like Mike Perry who's going to come forward, I think this can create a lot of opportunities for the takedown of Mickey Gall. He takes him down. He frustrates Mike Perry on the ground, makes him do something stupid, and probably gets another rear naked choke. So aside from the coaching issues from Mike Perry, it's a matter of Mickey Gall just may be stylistically more his kryptonite. And once again, small octagon. That usually favors power punchers. The problem is that Mike Perry, I think, puts a little too much into every punch. He doesn't set things up, doesn't use his jab that well. So I think he walks into takedowns. In a small octagon, I think Mickey Gall, being the bigger guy, leans on him, puts pressure on him, clinches him, and kind of wears him down for the late submission. I think that's probably what happens in this fight. Got to go with Mickey Gall over Mike Perry. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Great fight. Great matchmaking. I think it's exactly what both guys need. The issue to me in this fight is, well, there are two of them. First off is Dan Hooker's striking style is rangy, it's funky, it's accurate, does have knockout power. Dustin Poirier, more the traditional, although he is a southpaw, come forward and bang kind of guy. Good combinations, good power, good accuracy, but a bit more orthodox in the way he approaches his striking. Dan Hooker can get a little funky, drop his hands, take some risks, hit you in that place that you didn't see, works the body well, sneaky hook, all those things Dan Hooker has. Dustin Poirier is a bit more come straight at you. And we saw that. Of course, he has wins over Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, Max Holloway. A lot of bangers, he's able to wear them down eventually. But I think Dan Hooker's style is cut more in the mold of, not that he has quite the same style as a Conor McGregor, but more in that mold where rangy and difficult and hard to time. That's Dan Hooker's thing a little bit more. So I don't think he's going to stand in front of Poirier the way Justin Gaethje did, the way Eddie Alvarez did, the way Max Holloway did. I don't think he's going to do that. So I think tactically I give him a slight advantage. But Dustin Poirier has fought better talent and done better against better talent. Now, it's true, Dan Hooker, one of the guys he knocked out is Gilbert Burns, who's fighting for the welterweight title. So it's not like he's made his bones on a bunch of bums. But Poirier, in that run, facing Khabib, Eddie Alvarez, Eddie Alvarez, former champion. Justin Gaethje, current champion. Max Holloway, former champion. Anthony Pettis, former champion. It was just gold, 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 gold. He fought the best every time. The second issue I look at with this fight is Dustin Poirier, coming off a fight with Khabib. He's had a long layoff. Hasn't fought since last September. Not that long, but a decent layoff since last September. There's something about taking on the best, which Khabib is, the best at 155 pounds, and coming up short. Almost always, fighters in that position, it was a one-sided fight, have a down in the next fight. it's hard to get back on the horse after a loss like that. There's something about seeing exactly where you are in the world, exactly where you are amongst the elite. He is an elite fighter. He is one of the best. He deserves to be ranked where he is. But to find out, well, Khabib's just a level better than me right now. And I think if you had that fight 5 more times, Khabib wins at least 4 of them. I think just stylistically he has Poirier's number. So it's about not just beating Dan Hooker, but it's about the will to get back to that fight that you lost handily. Dan Hooker doesn't know. He's had losses before, of course, but he hasn't had that, I've taken on the best and I've come up short. Where do I go now? He hasn't had that reckoning yet. Dustin Poirier is coming off of that reckoning. He's coming off of the biggest fight of his career for the undisputed title, and he came up short. A lot of times it's really psychologically hard on fighters. And they can physically get everything back, but it's tough to rebound from something like that. And when it comes to the odds, a lot of the times you see a poor performance in their next fight. And so tactically, I give the slight edge to Dan Hooker, and psychologically, I give Dan Hooker a slight edge because of that, because of coming off that failure and the layoff associated with him. And you kind of, reassess everything about your career, and I think he's still in the middle of that. So if Poirier can put that behind him, if he can't, I think we're going to have an exciting fight. I really do think it's going to be an amazing contest. But the slight advantage that I give to Dan Hooker, I take him in the finale, probably by decision. But we'll see. All right? Appreciate you. I'm calling Titan tomorrow, so I will be watching the fight Saturday, but that's why this took me so long to get out, is that I've been really busy this week getting ready for Titan FC. A lot of research goes into that. So appreciate you guys, and I'll see you after the next fight.